the next speaker we have is Professor Claire Craig. And Claire is a reader in design and creative practice in health and co-director of Lab for Living, an interdisciplinary research cluster at Sheffield Hallam University. And the Lab for Living has been running for 14 years. We just heard from Susanna that the Open Living Lab Days had their 10th anniversary. Last year we were online. But so that means Lab for Living really has a long history of being a lab, and I have the luck and the opportunity to work with Claire, and it's an absolute pleasure. Claire has really the well-being of people at her heart, and she has not on an incredible broad set of skills. She utilizes design methods, including artifacts, photography, and art to build understanding of the experiences of individuals and then develop creative responses to these. She does it with an incredible amount of energy and with a lot of heart. And I'm really looking forward to hear what she is about to tell us. Claire, are you happy to share your screen? You sent the slides in advance as well.
Yeah, so hopefully can you see that, Sonia, and everybody?
That's perfect, okay? Yes.
Perfect. Fantastic. Oh, so can I just say thank you first of all to the organisers for inviting me to speak this evening. It's morning in the United Kingdom, and to everybody who sat eating their dinner tonight watching this. So it's great that you've joined us, and I'd like to thank Sonia especially for, number one, her friendship, but also how she's inspired so much of the research that I personally undertake. So thank you. It's great to be here. So as Sonia said, my name is Claire Craig, and Sonia, I've had a promotion. I'm now Professor of Design and Creative Practice in Health at Sheffield Hallam University. The art school that I'm part of was founded in 1843, and I'm really lucky that in Sheffield, art and design is the real lifeblood of the city and a real kind of driver for change and innovation. So I'm in a kind of perfect space within that. But for the last 14 years, I've been the co-director of a living lab that we call Lab for Living, which is an interdisciplinary research group at the university that brings together design, creative practice, and health. We're part of a global network. So we have an international conference. So we've got a really amazing Design for Health community. We have our own journal that is published by Taylor and Francis. And most importantly, we're part of the European network of Living Labs. So it was great to hear your presentation, Susanna. Interestingly, I think at 14 years, we might be one of the oldest European living labs, which is really exciting. And I remember when we went to kind of get our award, if you like, I think in that room, we were definitely the oldest group there, but time has just kind of flown by. So I think since we were established, we've engaged in well over 100 externally funded research projects, all of which has focused on the role of design research in working with people to create products or services or use design as an intervention to promote quality of life. And because the way that the Living Lab works and how we kind of interact, and as Susanna said, that we work across lots and lots of different stakeholders and with people from very different places, because part of what we do is to work with industry. Many of these products are in existence in the real world, making a difference to people, which is absolutely great, which is what we really want in our research. The work that we do is so varied. You wouldn't believe it. And in the time that I've got, I'm not even going to be able to touch on a fraction of it. So you're going to have to invite me to Australia, Sonia, and I can spend days and days talking about the work, but it varies. So for example, this was a project working with people living with motor neuron disease to design an orthosis that was customizable, but also was less stigmatizing. We have interventions that use design and design thinking, teaching that to community living older people that are now part of government policy and that are rolled out across the United Kingdom and in parts of Europe. And then we work in using technology, and again, always with the kind of user at the centre of the process. I hope everybody would agree with me that every living lab slightly has its own flavour. And I want to spend the next 15 minutes really reflecting on the practices that are core to our approach in Sheffield, and to think about these in the context of COVID-19 and the pandemic that we find ourselves in the middle of, but particularly how that's impacted and the living lab methodology and what that's meant for the work that we've been doing with older people living in care homes and the future care home. I'm really hoping that we've got time for questions at the end, because I'd love to talk in more detail about these things. So I will kind of push on. So although every living lab has its own character, I think we're all united by this definition that we're user-centred, that we focus on open innovation ecosystems that are really based on this systematic user co-creation approach that integrates research and innovation processes into real-life communities and settings. You know, it's truly about working in partnership, and it's all about reciprocity, and that's absolutely what I take away from the job that I do every day, which is an absolute joy. For us, the key characteristics of Lab for Living are that we very much focus on a very open design process. So all of our research projects tend to start from a very open brief, and particularly around that area which is around planning and discovering and defining. Because I think if I went into a piece of research thinking that I knew what the question was, I'd be completely wrong. And I think that our experience has shown us in that co-creating the questions themselves with our communities actually take us to places where we need to be. We have a community hub that's based in the centre of Sheffield, where people can come and engage with us on a whole range of different projects. And there's something about the visibility of being in the centre and being so accessible that is very important. But equally, we go to people too. And so we work in communities, we work in halls, in villages and in cities. We work, wherever individuals are and wherever they want to meet us, we are there too. So again, I think that's really core in terms of how we work. And of course, I think to be authentic, I could say, oh, look, because we are a research centre, but to authentically engage people, we've had to develop methods that actually kind of create a kind of equality and a true kind of partnership. And we've spent many, many years doing this. So just a couple of examples. So for example, this is a methodology that we have using objects or artifacts to promote conversation with communities called Exhibition in the Box. And in using this, the home becomes transformed into a research lab, working with individuals, with older people in the communities and the homes where they live. We also use a lot of work using exhibition, again, bringing people together to talk around and interact, and using objects to ask questions, to really challenge and to provoke, and to question maybe things that we might assume. And we kind of play with that. So for example, this is a piece of work that we did looking at the future bathroom, where we made a whole field lab where people could actually sit and interact with the objects themselves. And then we created things like graffiti walls where people could actually write and record their responses to these. So we have a whole range of different methodologies, and the power of that, whether we're in Sheffield or whether we're in Turkey or whether we're in Australia, or whether we're in India, is that objects have these meanings and really break down these barriers and have a universal language for engagement. The other approach that we use is that we actually employ some of our participants or people in that community and people who represent end users as researchers. So we actually train and pay people. So for example, in the Future Bathroom project, when we were really looking at how we might think about and the role that design might play in creating future bathrooms that are sustainable and enable people to continue living in their own homes for as long as possible. Of course, when a young researcher goes to talk to an older person about what do you do in a bathroom, nobody would tell us. So we employed a whole group of amazing older people who went out into the community and who used photography and a cultural probe methodology to really gather incredibly rich data that led to extraordinary prototypes and outcomes. But also part of the joy of that is that when you really work in this way, is that you go into places that you never ever imagined that you would. We thought we would just end up with a whole set of kind of potential designs, but actually what transpired was that we ended up working with a really big bathroom manufacturing company, because older people told us if we'd have known this when we were in our 50s, we'd have redesigned our bathroom differently. And so, of course, but the benefits of that are extraordinary. With the bathroom project, I think we won a pretty big award around inclusive bathroom design, but also, around kind of what that meant around older people with a head-up collar, because people are the experts, the people that we engage with and that we work alongside of the experts, we make better products. So this straight away, the number of head-ups that are sold outnumber the number of people that are living with head drop, which is just extraordinary. We create things that work. And equally, we win various kind of different design awards, etc. So it works. So, on so many levels. And I think that's kind of the essence of what we do. So if I think about how we've translated that during this COVID pandemic, so in 2019, we were awarded quite a significant amount of funding by Research England as part of the Grand Aging Challenge and the Industrial Strategy. And within that strategy, there was a kind of real thought about how we might reconfigure the 100-year life, so that rather than thinking about the current 3-stage life model, whereby you're kind of working in this middle bit to amass enough funding to kind of allow you to retire and retire well for a number of years, that we look at a very different model, which is around the multi-stage life, which is in each phase of where we live, that literally we're kind of recreating and reinventing who we are. And a bit like your notion, Susanna, that life really is an experiment. Grattan Scott wrote about the fact that we need to move from recreation to recreation, and that notion of enabling and supporting throughout the life courses to be able to do that. So we were fortunate to be funded to do this work, because design within this context is seen as really pivotal, to move away from products and services that are taken in desperation to move towards things that are created for inspiration. And we felt that was a really kind of good kind of foundation on which to build this next kind of body of work that we were undertaking. And my particular interest is around notions of care, and particularly the future care home, which I know has had a lot of resonances in Australia, particularly with the recent commission around ageing. So care homes are quite complex spaces. They sit somewhere between hospital and home, and as a consequence, they have quite a confused function and aesthetic. So you can see in this image, you have the living room that at one level is a living room, but at another level is just a kind of storeroom. And then you have the adverts about what being in a home is going to be like, being at home, and then the reality in the bottom image of what some homes present as. So it's these are really complex spaces. And of course, that confusion and that slight mismatch extends into the types of products that are available to individuals that sit within those institutions, people who have huge amounts of dignity and experience, but maybe some of the products don't quite match up to the age appropriateness that we'd really love them to have. And has always been something that's massively motivated me, in the role that our design research might have in maybe addressing and challenging some of these elements. So in 2019, we were happily working with 10 care homes and probably about over 700 participants across Sheffield, really working with care home staff and residents, looking at what this confused aesthetic might be, and ways that we might actually can contribute, and developing methods to engage people and think about things differently. And that was going really, really, really well. And then COVID-19 hit. And COVID-19 has been really, really difficult in the United Kingdom, particularly for care home residents. And of all the deaths occurring as a consequence of COVID-19, 40% of those deaths have been older people living in care homes, which is absolutely devastating and extraordinary. And there was a moment when COVID began to happen, the care homes had already started to close down. And obviously at that point we weren't allowed to go in, and we were given very, very little contact. I think it would have been very easy at that point just to say, maybe let's just wait until we're through this crisis and then let's start again. But we didn't, because we believe absolutely in the Living Lab methodology and what we do. And the challenge that we had was then, okay, then, so let's take all the principles that we know and that we believe, and let's see how we can adapt them or use them within this kind of current space that we seem to be operating in. So literally within weeks, because again, the way that we work in this open innovation system means that we can be incredibly responsive. Within literally a couple of weeks, we created a web-based platform which had on it a whole range of different materials and resources that could support meaningful activity for residents and for care home staff, particularly because by that point staff were not receiving visitors from family members, and there was a real kind of lack of staff interaction, and staff were under a huge amount of pressure. So we did that almost immediately, and we released those. In our normal process, we would spend a huge amount of time co-creating, working with people to do that, and obviously we didn't have that time to do that so quickly. So we released 2 kind of themes a week, and over the weeks, I think in the end we had 28 themes, but people were constantly inputting, oh, that doesn't work, don't like that, that's great. So it was it was a work in practice. So we were really, really on the hoof, but that agility was so important. We used the same methods of engagement, but rather than us going into the care homes to undertake the work or to work in partnership with people there, we just gave the staff those methods and tools to be able to undertake that. And I think that was really, really exciting, because suddenly staff and residents were filming, recording, photographing, sending things back to us, challenging us, posing questions. And it's that lovely moment in that co-design methodology where absolutely people just take over, and almost you become that, right, okay, let's look at that. And this notion of this amazing remote co-design, it was absolutely extraordinary. One of the really exciting things that happened for us is that one of the individuals, and this was really just serendipity, obviously we've been going for 14 years, and at different points, we have people who work with us for a long, long time in some of the kind of projects that we work on, and they just keep in touch. And incredibly, one of the activity volunteers stroke coordinators had been part of another one of our projects maybe about 8 years ago, and it transpired that she was actually working in one of the homes. And what a fantastic thing to come back, and she was just extraordinary. But what we saw was this amazing role that she and others had in really upskilling and helping others in the home to become research partners. And it was just absolutely wonderful to see, because we weren't there, but we were watching that unfold, and it felt brilliant, because what we were seeing was this kind of emergence of this incredible ecosystem and network that we weren't leading, but that was finding its way and was just growing and growing before us. So, absolutely brilliant. And I think things that we just didn't anticipate was just the breadth of that. So literally, the homes themselves are then part of their own networks. So really quickly from Sheffield, we ended up working in Scotland, and there were amazing things that were happening in Brighton, and there were incredible feedback that we were having from homes in Wales, and people were sending photographs of things that they were doing and ways that they were using some of the things that we were sharing and giving feedback. And suddenly this whole thing had taken over. And at that point we were, we knew that of course we should just trust the system and how that evolves and how that works. But that was just really wonderful to see in the midst of this horrendous crisis that this was still working and functioning, this amazing methodology that was growing, and again just going in those incredible directions that you never ever quite anticipated to go in. Through this time there have been some extraordinary things that have been developed in response and that sit with the care homes, and these range from materials supporting family members who can't visit their relative, but who have really important things to say around closure and things that they want their family members to hear. So we have these really lovely materials, for example, things like You and Me. We have things of using taking very, very simple activities based on people's pets and turning them into things that kind of age appropriate, but again, create meaningful activity, right through to the things like another iteration of Life Cafe to the Care Cafe, enabling people to talk about end of life and care planning, but in a way that is supportive and brings people together in a really positive way. So I think that there's such a breadth of things. And I think the lessons that I would take away from this process, as I say, if you cut me in half, you would see that I'm a living lab, and that, Lab for Living, absolutely, this is how it survives, and this is how it's kept going for 14 years, this ability just to respond and to be with people and to learn from people and to trust in what that is. But I think for me, it's been a reminder about the power of this methodology and about the ecosystem, because ultimately it's about designing communities. And that's what we're about. Often I think sometimes we can forget that we're there, yes, the community we work with and we work through, and they're part of who we are, but actually seeing this way of actually the methodology building these communities was such an extraordinary thing. And I guess in a conference that's around building better, I suppose I guess my reflection is a feeling of, amidst the dreadfulness, is a sense of optimism, because certainly as we move forward in Lab for Living, this experience will take us in completely different directions. And I think that experience will make us actually into a better living lab. That again, just a reminder that we're so focused on that open innovation, the systematic nature of user co-creation. But the most amazing thing is working with innovation, but in real life community settings, that actually, rather than us shaping them, they very much come and they shape us. And maybe part of the building better is maybe building us better too. So I think that's all I'm going to say. I hope I've not underrun or overrun, Sonia.
Well, that was wonderful to see. Thanks so much for this, as Phil says, very, very inspiring presentation. We have a few minutes, and we have 3 questions as far as I see, and I've worked myself from the bottom up. Judith was asking, the rapid response you did with the care homes, the webpage, it seemed to work. Is there therefore a lesson about being agile early on in a living lab project?
Oh yeah, gosh, do you know what, completely. I mean, I think that was just such a big lesson for us, because ordinarily we are so careful, we sit and there'll be so much discussion, and I remember when we had this, obviously we were talking with the with the care homes, and then we were talking with the team, and the team were like, oh, do you think we should be doing that? And it was really interesting. We just said, look, we've just got to do it because we're in this crisis at the moment. But tell you what, let's just do it a little bit at a time. And then let's just try and learn together. And it was just so liberating. It was so liberating, because rather than having this really long lead in, it was just putting something there. And absolutely, it could have fallen completely flat on its face, which is fine. But I think that was just something that we really have absolutely taken away from that. I completely agree. Out there, but then it becomes like this dialogue, and a bit like a sacrificial concept. It's there, and then we just learn from it. Absolutely, yeah, really good
Beautiful.
point.
Thank you. There is a question by Amanda, and she's interested to understand how the Living Lab is perceived by the university you're based in, and whether the university has supported you in this way.
Yeah, Amanda, that is such a great question. So at first, I've got to say, oh my word, I think the university were really a bit scared and completely cynical, and because it's like you're jumping out of an aeroplane, aren't you? And it was so not like anything else that they'd ever seen. The notion that we were working across 2 faculties, the notion that the community was the driving force, and that whole thing of, oh my word. But actually, I think what's really interesting is last year we were made into a strategic centre in the university. So what the university is now seen as it's a leading light to that other faculties should model themselves on. And the funding from Research England that we achieved, we were given £4 million for that work. That was to take our methodology and the way that we work, and to share that with lots of other institutions. So now, suddenly, from being the kind of thing that nobody talked about in the university, we're now the kind of, you're okay, which is a great privilege. But all tribute to the university. It could have gone horribly wrong, but they trusted us enough to say, okay, let's see what happens. But our survival is completely dependent on external funding. So I think that's really important to say. But I think the success that we've had has been a kind of reflection of the methodology and the people that we've worked alongside.
Thank you. And a last question from Phil. How do you match the economic, commercial-driven innovation policy of government with innovation in design as a service?
Yeah, we try and get in there. So what's great is that we have quite a lot of Trojan horses. So because there can be these conflicts, and I think particularly like with the industrial strategy, there is an assumption that, that the research should just be about inventing things, but actually for us, the research is about creating knowledge that then can inform products and services and interventions. And it's great when we see that actually manifest itself in things, but actually our core business it's the knowledge and the learning that we then share to enable society and others who are in similar positions to kind of make shifts themselves. And that's the core focus. So there's always a slight tension, but what's brilliant is that we are around the table with governments, with Scottish Government and with Department of Health, and where we're able to say these things. But the fact that we can demonstrate and show these concrete successes is absolutely integral. So just an encouragement to everybody out there, which is extraordinary.